All right, here we go on our fifth and final lecture video for this particular topic. So, different ways that we might apply motivational theories a little bit. Huh? So, organizational behavioral management. Okay, it takes advantage of behaviorism. Okay, behaviorism, modifying behavior. Ultimately, the principles of learning, modification of behavior by manipulating outcomes, right? Rewards and punishments and things like that. And so organizational behavioral management can be used to modify many different organizational behaviors, not just job performance, but is often used to modify workplace safety behaviors. Uh-huh. And so organizational behavioral management ultimately is a form of applied behavior analysis. And many of you, if you've ever taken a counseling class, have heard of applied behavior analysis. It's very commonly used in counseling or in educational psychology. If you have an individual client in counseling, yes, that's a cat's tail, yes, great. If you have an individual client in counseling, or dude, sit, he's got a cone on his head, okay? Don't, cat, go, I love you. If you've got an individual client that has behavioral problems, you can set up a applied behavior analysis, a behavioral management plan where and we'll talk about it here, but you can find the same thing in ed psych. It's pretty much the same thing, but we find here in industry and IO psych, it's rather than individual workers, it's usually targeting a category, a group of workers. Okay, but ultimately it works on the ABC model. We need to understand the antecedents of behavior. Where do they come from? We need to understand the behaviors themselves that are being exhibited, and we need to understand the consequences of those behaviors, hence ABC. And so there are 5 steps to a behavioral management plan used in human resources. And again, I mean, if you've ever taken a counseling class or ed psych or anything like that, you'll find the same things in there, okay? It's just slightly different words, but the same basic procedure. You need to target specific behaviors that need to be changed. You cannot walk into a behavioral management system and say, oh, the workers suck. That isn't going to work, okay? You target specific behaviors that you would like to change, okay? You will measure those specific targeted behaviors because you need a baseline, because you are going to do some kind of an implementation here, and so you need a baseline upon which to compare, okay? Then you're going to look at, and in the case of an ABA applied in a clinical setting, you're going to target undesirable behaviors, and then you're going to try to find the reinforcers that are driving those behaviors. Okay, what is it that, and in an ed psych sense, little Jimmy is always jumping up out of his chair during class. Okay, why? Why is Jimmy jumping out of his chair? Oh, I believe that Jimmy is receiving reinforcement when his friends, cheer him on or something like that. Aha! I found the thing that is driving the behavior. Well, you got to do the same kind of a thing in the factory. You've identified behaviors that you would like to, that are undesirable, you would like to change, and you have to find out what's causing those undesirable behaviors. And therefore, you create an intervention based on what you believe are the reasons that are driving the target behavior. Okay? And then finally, after the intervention, you come back and you evaluate the success of the intervention based on comparing it to the baseline. Remember that pre-test, post-test, quasi-experimental methods that we referred to earlier? That's exactly what we've got here. Okay? Exactly. And so management by objectives is a different strategy. Management by objectives is the process of setting goals and basing performance appraisal on the attainment of those goals. Okay? And so in fact here, managers and subordinates set goals together, okay? They work together, they meet to set goals. The subordinate ultimately develops a plan for how to achieve the goals. So the manager and subordinates get together and say, in the next month, this is what I need to happen. A subordinate says, this is how I'll make it happen. Okay? And then after that 1 month, a performance review is conducted, and the process comes to a conclusion. Except that doesn't come to a conclusion. Goals are set for the next time period. So it's a cyclical thing where performance is. And so let's try this management by objectives as two examples here. We'll call it the same example. Let's say the company is UPS, right? They're delivery drivers. And so some of the most important things that delivery drivers need to do, of course, they're on a time crunch, by the way, to get their stuff done. And so what they want to do is they want to increase the number of complete intersection stops and the percentage of seatbelt use. Okay? And so what they're going to do in this particular example is the bottom line, the control group, they're going to measure complete stops, they're going to measure seatbelt use as a percentage of drivers in baseline, during the intervention, when the intervention is withdrawn, and on a follow-up. And as you can see, the control condition in both cases, in both of these measures, really didn't change, and why would they, right? Then what we find here is they've created two different groups, okay? Rather than just an experimental and a control, they've come up with two different experimental groups essentially. One in which participants voluntarily participate, and one in which they're assigned to do this. And so what we see is there's a question of motivation there. Those that are voluntarily participating clearly have more motivation than those that are forced to participate. But what we see here is the baseline level of usage of seatbelt is higher, very similar here. And then with the intervention, we can see both the voluntary participation and the assigned group do in fact increase seatbelt use. Remove the intervention, and what happens is seatbelt use comes down slightly, and then if you do a follow-up like a month later, clearly those that were assigned to be in the condition just go back to their baseline levels. We find when it comes to seatbelt use, the participant group, those that voluntarily participate, do in fact increase across the different stages. Those that are forced to, assigned to, don't change, and the control doesn't change. So kind of an interesting idea. We're going to manage by objectives and allow the workers themselves to figure out how they're going to achieve those objectives. Another application of motivational principles would be job enrichment, where you would try to strengthen the motivating potential of a job by looking at the 5 core job dimensions. Remember, skill variety, task identity, task significance, autonomy, feedback. And looking at these 5 and changing to the job to fit what motivates different people. As we said, certain different motivating ideas, flexible time, telecommuting, technology upgrades. Yeah, I want a new computer in my office, okay? Don't get me started. Changing in the way information, new responsibilities, different. So every worker's going to have a different desire. Find the desire, enrich your job. And then finally, job crafting is an interesting approach. And so the idea is that the employees themselves almost sort of negotiate their own job. They are going to modify their job using ideals. Employees negotiate with supervisors about their conditions and arrangements, and so this allows them to craft that package of a job that they desire. Well, I'm willing to bypass a raise if I can have a flexible start time, okay? Because I can't always be here at 9 o'clock on the dot. So if you allow me to say start at 9:30 on days I can't get here, but leave 30 minutes later, I'm still clocking the same number of hours. But this flexible scheduling is perhaps something I would be willing to bypass a raise to get. Okay. All right. So next topic we're going to talk about is going to be job satisfaction, and I will see you for that.